So I released an Unearthed Arcana video last week, which you can check out the iCards up there, and I thought I was going to have time to do Onomancy before Wizards released another one. I was wrong. Like a day before it released, I looked at the Unearthed Arcana and boom, we got 3 new. So we're going to do 4 Unearthed Arcana in this video. So the way I do these things is I divide it into thematic stuff and mechanical stuff. I'll talk about the thematic stuff of the class, but then I'll talk about mechanical stuff. So something may be broken, but it's also really thematic, so I'll talk about it then, and then, criticize it here. So let's begin. So Onomancy is the one that I didn't cover on the last Unearthed Arcana. It's the arcane tradition of true names. So true names in D&D are different from true names in like the Kane Chronicles. Kane Chronicles' true name, it's very hard to figure out, and it gives you great power over the person, whereas a D&D true name is just the name that a person identifies themselves by. So, for instance, it'd be Caleb for me. Now, before, true names have just been, like, helpful for summoning fiends. There are certain spells that if you speak their true name, you get advantage on the check, or they have disadvantage on the save, or something like that. But now, it's more expanded and affects other stuff. Also, it gives the idea that maybe wizards of this tradition would, hide their name, but I think that would actually apply to most higher level beings. So if you do add this subclass, be prepared to have to give nicknames to everybody, otherwise true names are going to be cast all over the place. So the first feature this class gets, besides bonus proficiencies, is Extract Name, where it does some little magic things and he learns the name. This isn't... Most of the times, you can actually learn the true name just by asking, hey, what's your name? I'm not going to say, this person is trying to use magic on me, so I'm going to say, Joshua. No, I'm going to say Caleb, because that's what I go by. But this is actually more useful for, hey, bandit number 5, what's your name? I'd like to use some spells on you. So this feature is kind of similar to other wizarding schools where they get the half golden time cost to their school spells. Each of these features are designed to get the arcane tradition the things that they use, either be it transmutation spells or true names. So with Faithful Aiming, you're getting a little buff or a little debuff. Bless and Bane are, yes, they are divine spells, but they're just penalty D4s or additional D4s, so I don't see any real problem with this. It's not like you're getting them Cure Wounds or Guardian of Faith. So Resonant Utterance, the idea behind this is you're using the magical significance of their true name to make your spells more powerful, or to bypass their defenses. Have them use the magic of that true name to affect that person in some way. And Relentless Naming is kind of similar. You're using, specifically you're using their true name to bypass their defenses. I'd usually flavor this or say that I'm not attacking the person's body or anything, which is laced with magical energy, but I'm attacking their soul, their essence. So let's move back to the beginning, start with mechanical stuff. Extract Name, it's a wisdom save, so a lot of people are going to be proficient in it. I do think there should be a line here that says that this is a divination magic, so spells and abilities that protect from divination, such as non-detection, will work against this true name thing. Because if you have the secret campaign boss that nobody knows about, of course they have non-detection, of course they have mind blank or something like that. And also, there's a wording that says you can't use it again if the person succeeds on their save. So does that mean until the next long rest, or forever? I don't know, and I'd really like some clarification on that. I'd say you can't use it until the end of your next long rest. So with Faithful Naming, you do get to cast it without a spell slot. You get more effectively more spell slots, but there are some restrictions. For instance, you have to know the true name, and also you have to. It's only a number of times equal to your intelligence modifier, so it's more balanced there. Another thing I will point out is you have to speak the true names of the targets you're casting it at. So usually you're going to be casting Bless with this because you know your allies' names, but you don't know all of your enemies' names. And by the time you get to where you know a significant number of true names of your enemies, your combat's probably close to over, so why use Bane? So I have a lot to talk about Resonant Utterances. Resonant Utterances are kind of like the meta magic of this, the Sorcerer, only for the Wizard. So actually let's move over. So right here is a table I made of comparing the metamatic options and also the resonant options that the with sorcerers and this wizard has, and also the number of uses they can use. Sorcerer, it's based on the average cost of things, which I think is about like it's 1.75, something like that. So you can see they have basically the same amount of things that they can learn. Another thing to point out here is that the sorcerer can use theirs more, but that's because they have more one sorcery point options, whereas the resonant utterances kind of cost out at 2 sorcery points. When it comes to the spells like heightened and devastation, which are both impose disadvantage on the save, you can actually, as a Onomancy wizard, cast it 1 to 2 times more than the sorcerer, which I think you shouldn't, because that's stepping on the power of the sorcerer. So this needs to be like limited in some way. I think devastation actually needs to be removed entirely, because you already have a disadvantage on saves because you speak their true name on summoning spells for like demons and devils. The other 2 that are possibly too powerful are absorption and nullification. Nullification is basically a free to spell magic, and absorption is kind of like vampiric touch, only you are already doing the damage, but it heals you twice the amount of vampiric touch. And both of those, Dispel Magic and Vampiric Touch, are 3rd level spells, meaning starting out you get 4 more 3rd level spell slots specifically for those if you choose those. So I think these need to be limited, alright? Either they require 2 to 3 uses of the resonant utterances, or we need to nerf them a little bit. So these things need to be worked on. But the other ones, they're pretty cool, like Puppetry and Dissolution and Sympathy. So these are really cool. And then Relentless Naming, I think I saw a video by Jeremy Crawford where he was explaining like the objective here is to bypass creatures' defenses. And if so, why not just say this ignores resistances or something like that? I think that would be much better. So one more thing to note before we move on, this subclass would actually be pretty good as a summoner, specifically a devil summoner, because if you learn the true name of a devil, then you can make a devil's talisman, which allows you greater control over devils. Demon summoner might work, but demons have demonic amulets, which are more like horcruxes as opposed to true name based magic items. And by the way, this stuff is all found in the monster manual and the lore and things like that. Now let's move on to the fighter subclass, which is the Rune Knight. Basically, this student of giants who learned the magic of runes. What I love about this is the fact that they turned this into a different magic system as opposed to just Eldritch Knight number 2, which is really good. I love it. Bonus proficiencies, you have Smith's Tools, so you can, mark runes and things, and you have Speak Giant, so you can read said runes. Nothing much to say here other than that it works. Now let's move on to rune magic. So I like the fact that each of these runes has a passive and an active bonus, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on when we talk about the mechanical side of things. Another thing I would say is I really feel like these runes should have to be like carved into tools. Like if you have a shield, for instance, and you want to put Haug on it, I'd say sure, but also you have to first smith it in there. When you touch it, you're just filling that rune with power. It doesn't feel right to have runes and just plant them on things without, doing some work to get it. With the rune options, they're based on the giant types. I don't know much about the lore of giants, so I can't tell you whether these fit thematically. Hopefully somebody else will do that, but we're going to move on to the next one, which is Giant Might. And I think this is maybe too many powerful features at level 3. Like you get 2 runes and you get giant growth. It's just, I think it's a bit too much. Or maybe this is just a rune every Rune Knight gets, but even still. Maybe like put it at the next level or something like that, but we need to break these things up. So with defensive runes, one thing I want to note is the AC bonus is based on your intelligence modifier, not your strength modifier. This is not a brutish subclass, this is a very wise subclass, or intelligent I should say. And I also like it that it specifically says it's only for other people, which makes you more of a team player, and also you're a fighter, you're going to have the higher armor class, so use this to protect your squishy wizard friends. And with great stature, all I have to say is, yep. Well, actually I do have more to say. One, it's cool, it gives more of the sense of being the giant without actually having to not enter the dungeon because you're a giant. And 2, it is a mechanical way to win the "but I want to be the super tall skinny elf" argument. The last feature we're going to talk about thematically is Blessing of the Allfather. It's giving another friend the same giant growth feature. I can't say thematically, for instance, but more on the mechanical side, it's team playering. This is usually going to be used on the other fighter or barbarian or whatever it is of the group instead of the squishy wizards. So you actually have, by this time, abilities that can help all of your party members, which I think is really good. So now let's move back to the mechanical side of things with the runes and the rune magic. One thing about the passives that I really like is it's not always resistant to damage. Like the fire giant, it's instead like something to do with smith's tools, which as far as I've heard, fire giants are smiths, so it makes sense. They're very creative and coming up with ways to not be just resistance, which is useful but also boring. And each rune's active feature, they're pretty cool, but they're not like insanely overpowered. What I like about them is the fact that these runes give you more options. The primary use of these runes is to make your attacks better, provide you with different actions to take, which is always good for the fighter, or helping your allies with things, which seems to be a running theme with this subclass. Honestly, I can't complain. These are really great. The only thing I think needs to be worded a bit more carefully is whether or not these require like concentration for the active features, because otherwise you're stacking continuous effects, which is not good. And so with Giant Might, it's basically an enlarge reduce, but d6s instead of a d4s. I don't see why they can't have d4s. It's just a little bump. It makes them feel cooler. And Defensive Runes is also like another spell. It's like Shield, but for your allies. So you're using your reaction, which you could use for an attack of opportunity, which makes this really interesting choice. Do I increase my damage output by doing one more attack, or do I help my friends? Usually, if it's a fighter, they're going to choose the latter because they don't want to swing their sword yet another time. With Greater Stature, Paladins get a d8 to weapon damage at level 11, so I'm okay with having a sort of continuous d8 to the fighter's attacks. It gives the fighter a bit more consistent damage as opposed to the Paladin's more bursty damage. With Rune Magic Mastery, which we didn't talk about in thematic, because it's purely a mechanical thing, you get to use them twice between short or long rests. It just seems like too many runes. Say, the average adventuring day is 6 to 8 medium to hard encounters with 2 short rests interspersed between, so you're doing about 2 to 3 encounters per short rest. Before, you had just 4 runes by this point, so basically you were using one active ability every battle, which is always nice, again, giving you the options. But the problem arises when you have basically 8 runes and you have 2 to 3 encounters to put them on. Maybe I'm looking more at the dungeon side of things, like, hey, some dungeons, it's not all going to be medium and hard encounters, it's going to be medium, there's going to be some easy in there. So maybe that's what they're doing, saying, hey, we want you to have the runes in every... Blessing of the Allfather, it's basically a twin to enlarge. 18th level parties can get up to a whole lot more crazy shenanigans as this, so I don't really see the problem on the mechanical side of things. And overall, this subclass, I really liked it. It's very well designed, they're not too overpowered, all the features. I'd make basically no changes to this. Probably even just like say, alright, copy, paste, boom, we're done. Now let's move on to the Ranger, my favorite class, and we're talking about an interesting sort of character concept, the Swarm Keeper, which basically means you get to control a swarm of bees or hummingbirds or whatever. Now it does say in the flavor text that it's fey creatures, so that means that they aren't specifically tied to like, they're just bees. They could be hummingbirds, they could be spiders or scorpions or something like that. So that'll come up into play with, Writhing Tide later on. You could also reflavor this as having a very trained swarm of bees, but some of the things wouldn't make sense. Again, Writhing Tide is the big one. With Swarm Keeper, Magic Fairy Fire is reinforcing the Fae theme, Gaseous Swarm is turning you into the swarm, and everything else is either or is created by various types of insects, so like web is spiders and things. I can just imagine somebody just spamming Gaseous Swarm and saying, no, my character is a swarm of bees. So Gathered Swarm is your unique attack that you get with this subclass. The swarm follows your attack or rides on the weapon, which is good because otherwise you're going to be whacking a bugbear with a pole of hummingbirds, which is just ridiculous and doesn't fit into most campaigns. But saying, aha, the one I attack, you go kill that. That's a thing that a trained swarm would do. So I think it's pretty good. I'd also say you could change it instead of force damage to bunch of ink-piercing, slashing, or poison because, you know, bees will sting, hummingbirds will peck, things like that. Writhing Tide is where you learn to ride the swarm. I imagine it'll be like the villain from Big Hero 6 who rides on a sea of nanobots to climb up things and go faster. Scuttling Enemy, this is actually the least swarmy of the features since you're sending out somebody to go scout. But I mean, I get it. You would say, hey, this is... the swarm is cool, but this time requires for just one member of the swarm. You go out. Also, another thing to mention, it does not say in this feature that this creature can attack, and it actually specifically lists the actions that you can have it take. So this is solely a scout, but because it's solely a scout, I don't get why you can teleport to it when you dismiss it. I don't see any reason why you get to go into their space or things like that. Storm of Minions is pretty cool. The swarm starts acting independently of you as they start moving around. The only thing I see wrong with this feature is the fact that you can't attack the swarm. I get it. A sword attack is not going to do anything to a swarm of hummingbirds, but a fireball sure is. So I think Area of Effect should have at least some effect on this, or maybe the Fae just like blink into the Feywild and then come back when it's over. But that's all I gotta say about thematic. Let's move on to the mechanical side of things and talk about Gathering Swarm, where they get a 1d6 to all weapon attacks for a minute. It's more like Hunter's Mark. It's better than Monster Slayer's Prey, which is 1d6 on all weapon attacks against a specific target. I don't think we should increase the damage to 2d6 because it then starts outclassing Hunter's Mark. You get to use this quite a bit without spell slots. So in terms of competing against Hunter's Mark, this is going to come out on top, which I don't think it should. Writhing Tide is more of a movement options. Rangers get climbing and flying, albeit a little bit slower. I like it, although the only concern I have is that it messes with the revised Ranger and my revision of the Ranger, which I will make a video about later. Stay tuned. But in those ones, you get the ability to disengage as a bonus action, whereas with this subclass, you get the ability to disengage as a bonus action as part of one of the options. So there's some conflict there. It'd probably have to be revised in order to play in my game because that's the Ranger I use. With Scuttling Eyes, I like the simplicity of the creature that this feature gives you. All you know about it is that it's some tiny creature of some sort. It's got a 40-foot movement speed in basically everything. You can see through its eyes and pilot it, and it makes a saving throw or dies if it takes some damage, which is a more simplified version of hit points, you know, something that we saw in Matt Colville's Strongholds and Followers. This simplicity is very good because otherwise you have to pull out a stat block and say, okay, what features I'm gonna be using? Do I really need to know this creature's charisma? No, they're just my scout. The teleport ability is easily abused. For instance, if there's just a crack in the wall, send one spider through, boom, you're in there. So I think the teleporting feature needs to be taken out. The Storm of Minions thing, one thing that's interesting to note, you only gain 1 d8 HP whenever your swarm attacks any creatures, not 1 d8 per person, because otherwise it turns into not very good. If it was 1d8 for every creature that your swarm attacked, then I think that'd be probably more open to abuse. Also something to note here that the swarm has to be in the person's space, so you can't just move it around the battlefield and attack everyone. It has to stay in their space for a while in order to do damage to it. Okay, so I haven't been giving many praises, but really this is a well-designed subclass and all the features work well with thematically. I was just focusing on the criticisms because that's what's useful for Wizards of the Coast, and I don't have the time to heap praise on each and everything that the subclass gets right. Now let's move on to the fourth and final subclass that I'm going to be talking about, and that is the Revised Rogue. The thing about this, I like the fact that this rogue is, it's not a, oh, I just came back. It's more of a, I think I had another life before this. It's not just somebody who resurrects themselves. It's you're learning that you're slowly learning that this is not your first life, but you don't have memories of that first life. Also, the thing to note here is that elves have a reincarnation ability. When they die, they don't die. They actually just come back as another elf. You get some of the memories eventually, but I think there should be restrictions, like elves can't play this unless there's a way to kill elf souls permanently, in which case, yeah. Because these aren't typical elf abilities, so it doesn't make sense that the actually reincarnated one does get these spooky reincarnation ones. Another question I have, and before we move on to the actual thing, is why is a rogue archetype? It seems more like a monk archetype, or like a background or maybe a prestige class, but it doesn't seem specifically a rogue archetype. So with tokens of past lives, it's very similar to Knowledge Domain's Channel Divinity, which gives you a limited use of proficiencies. Revive Nature is also pretty cool. It's got some minor benefits, but it's not open to abuse. For instance, you don't eat or drink, but you still have to breathe, meaning gaseous attacks still affect you, and you can't just, walk underwater. Which I mean would be cool. With Bolts from the Grave, the implication is that necrotic energy revived you, which would usually come from, like, either escaping death or persuading a god of death to send you back. But something like maybe a fiend sending you back, or a good god, which would probably be more like radiant energy. So, Bolts from the Grave is... I think Bolts from the Grave needs to be less specifically like this. You were revived by necrotic magic. Connect with Dead is pretty cool. It's like Speak with Dead, but instead of you reanimating them, it's more like you are partially dead, so you can speak to them just as much as you can do those people who are still alive, for now. And I also like the idea of not knowing whether it's your talent or the spirit's. It gives you a sort of identity crisis, like, first of all, I don't know who I was before, and now I don't even know who I am right now. An Audience with Death, this increases the Revive's ability to be an ambassador with death. This is even more powerful in knowledge gathering, which I think is pretty cool. Ethereal Jaunt, the themes here is that your body is being blurred between living and dead, so you can walk in the places where ghosts tend to walk, which is the ethereal plane. Now, going back to the mechanical side of things, I have a lot of problems with Bolts of the Grave. The first is, when is it going to happen? Like, it says, like, after your cunning action, so you take your action, which is like a rapier attack or something, then you take your bonus action to say dash, and then after that bonus action part 2 is Bolts from the Grave. That seems kinda... that messes with the action economy a lot. I mean, I understand the reasoning. You want this rogue subclass to have the ability to get sneak attack in an additional way, but I think this should be a cunning action, not cunning action plus this. Connect with Dead, I was fine with the one skill or thing you get each day, but Connect with Dead gives you another one. Granted, it's like, it'll be a language or a tool proficiency as well, possibly, but I don't think it's wise to give the rogue, the skill-heavy subclass, yet another proficiency, and specifically this is a proficiency they choose. So, if they know, hey, I'm going to need to deceive this person, do we have a dead body around? I can speak to it. Or even worse, hey, I'm going to need some athletics for this this challenge. I'm going to go murder somebody and grab me some athletics. Alright, y'all cool? Alright, you want some lemonade? I'll get you that as well. An Audience with Death, I think there's some interesting mechanical implications of giving you advantage with death saving throws, and also this. With the advantage on death saving throws, you're more likely to roll a 20, which gives you up to 1 hit point, which will stop the audience. So there's a limit on how many times. It's not going to be, probably not going to be 5 questions every time. But another thing I think could be abused here is it says when you make a failed death save. I'm not sure if this means like you get attacked and then you get 2 automatic failed death saves. I'm not sure if it means that. If it does, then it's very, very broken, because you just drop yourself to 0 hit points. Somebody punches you, you get 2 questions, then the cleric heals you, the healer heals you, you go up, and then somebody knocks you down again, gives you another 2 death saving throws, so like basically spamming all the questions at this entity. Ethereal Jaunt, it's actually not that much different to Cunning Action with Dash, the only thing is it is teleportation instead of just moving around, so it helps you avoid traps a little bit. Also, the feature does provide things like it can't go through like a wall of force or a magical energy barrier, but the reasoning behind this is it's meant to be read by experienced DMs that if something is blocking them in the ethereal plane, they can't go through it, but for beginning DM who don't know that much about the ethereal plane, this is helping them, which is always good, I think. Overall, it's got some really interesting abilities. I'd turn this into a prestige class. I don't think this is a rogue archetype necessarily. And of course it's got a little bit of stuff, it needs to be shored up to prevent abuse. And overall, all of these subclasses I think are doing really well in having abilities that fit the theme. Obviously, Onomancy is more out there since we don't really know what to expect with this type of magic, but like Rune Knight, Swarmkeeper, Revived, everything feels like it belongs in the archetype, and most of them are pretty well designed as well. So I'm very excited for these subclasses. I'm interested to see what eventually we're gonna get, like a source book or something, maybe Xanathized guide to everything else or something like that. So if you like what you see here, of course, you know what to do. This is YouTube, so please just, subscribe and stuff. This is Intelligent 14 Wisdom 2, and y'all have been my captive audience, so thank you very much.